The Navy has a new framework for creating unmanned systems for its fleet. The document lists 5 overarching goals, but that document doesn't specify targets for the number of vessels or the timeline. Bryan Clark is senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, former special assistant to the Chief of Naval Operations and former director of the CNO's Commanders Action Group. Bryan, welcome. Thanks for coming on the program. What do you take away from this unmanned campaign plan that the Navy has released?
Well, thanks for having me on, Francis. It's great to see you again. The campaign plan, I think, fell a little short. A lot of people were criticizing it because it didn't really give a sense of where the Navy was going. It sort of described where the Navy is right now. It described the vehicles they're pursuing today, some of the missions they're going to be used for, but not entirely what the mission set is. And then also described the changes they want to make to the way that they buy new systems, which I think was actually the best part of the report, was the changes to how the acquisition and research and development process might go.
What are the changes that the Navy's talking about in that area? Because the Defense News report about this, this hearing on the Hill about this, referenced the remote multi-mission vehicle, which did not go very well.
Right. The RMMV, as we call it, was not a success story. It was an attempt to try to create a semi-submersible unmanned vehicle that would tow around a mine-clearing sled. It's just an engineering nightmare, to try to make something that'll do to drag a very heavy object like that using a diesel-powered semi-submersible. So the Navy's moved on to using an unmanned surface vessel, which is essentially just a boat that they've turned into an unmanned system that can then tow that same sled around, which is a much simpler solution, easier from an engineering perspective. So what the Navy is doing is a lot more of this prototyping and then developing an idea and trying to stick with the most mature technologies possible, and then get it into the fleet slowly. The RMMV idea was to try to introduce something very new and disruptive rapidly. It just failed to come through.
What do we know from this new document and from other efforts that the Navy's undertaken about how they plan to change that acquisition track? Because, as you mentioned, there is a little bit of detail here about that.
Yeah, so Congress has been beating the Navy up for several years now about trying to introduce new technologies too quickly. And so they want the Navy to take more time to mature the technologies before they get introduced into a new system, and then take some time to use that system to develop the operational concepts before they introduce it to the fleet. So the Navy is going to take that approach and try to mature underlying technologies and then incorporate them into vehicles. To get the speed, though, that they want, they're going to try to do a little bit in parallel. So they're going to buy some vehicles that can act as proxies that they can use for testing out new ConOps, while at the same time developing technologies for the eventual vehicles they're going to use in real operational applications. So a little bit of a parallel track to gain some speed, but they're going to try to do what the Congress wants them to do, which is to mature technologies before they get put into a final production vehicle they're going to give to military people to try and use.
How is that different from the concurrence that got the F-35 into trouble, though?
Right. And so the idea would be that you're just using the proxy vehicles to essentially develop operational concepts and see what the utility of the platform is, not to try to design the vehicle. So the design and the development of the vehicle will be proceeding on a completely different track. And that'll happen in series, just like we've talked about with develop the technologies, figure out how they get integrated into a platform, and then field that platform. So that kind of happens on one track. And the Navy's going to take these proxies and use them for experimentation to figure out, well, what is it that the utility of this platform going to be down the road? So there's a risk of concurrency, certainly. But I think they're trying to come up with a way to get the speed they need while at the same time trying to achieve the maturity and the engineering reliability they need.
But it sounds like the proxies are prototypes. They're test vehicles and not anything that's ever intended to go into to be a mature piece of equipment that somebody will use at the tip of the spear. Is that right? Right.
That's what they're arguing, yes.
All right. What will you watch as this develops, Bryan, both in the hardware itself and in the people that the Navy will need to operate this? People say unmanned. It's not really, nothing's really unmanned. Somebody's got to manage it somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one thing that we're finding is that the Navy's going to have to really consider which platform should be manned, because you need a person on board to do maintenance and repairs because the system's going to be out there long enough. Like the large unmanned surface vessel the Navy's been talking about is probably going to end up being a manned vessel most of the time, just because if it's out for months at a time, it's going to require some sort of maintenance and oversight that people are going to have to provide. It's just not practical to have people keep flying out to deal with a broken large unmanned surface vessel. So that's essentially a crewing model. The medium unmanned surface vessel, though, is supposed to operate completely on its own. So there's going to be manning associated with it to go out and take care of it and maybe even repair it in the field. So those people will be more the mechanical repair type, whereas the large unmanned surface vehicle will be more like the operator, maintainer type like we have in the Navy today.
We have about a minute left, Bryan. What does the Navy need to do to soothe the members of Congress who weren't impressed by this plan? Congresswoman Luria, I was really disappointed with the lack of substance. What do they need to do to put meat on the bones, Bryan?
Well, I think, like I said, the part that seemed to have a lot of interesting ideas in was the R&D side, but on the part about the plan and the vision and the campaign plan to get there, that was really lacking. So the Navy needs to identify the missions that they want these unmanned systems to support, what that means for their design and requirements, and then how they're going to do a roadmap, essentially, to build out the systems that provide those mission needs. And so none of that was in the report. It was really lacking on that whole discussion about mission to task to requirements.
Bryan Clark, thanks very much. As always, great to see you.
Great to see you. Thanks, Francis.